Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker fan sports show.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast. I'm your host, David Gaspers, and I'm with Honky.
Let's sell out the vault this weekend, Redcasters. Saturday, women's basketball plays Iowa at 1 p.m. Sunday, men's basketball plays Maryland at 4 p.m. Two huge games. Go Big Red.
Everybody's on the bandwagon all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Also with Boomer.
Well, we got softball and a nice winning streak. Husker baseball kicking off here shortly. Men's basketball starting their run to the NCAA tournament. Heck of a week for a Husker fan podcast.
I love our fan base. No expectations whatsoever. Couple of wins, and suddenly we're going to the tourney. Honky, we have a special guest tonight. You want to introduce him?
Absolutely. We welcome back friend of the Redcast, Adam McClintock, the college football professor, co-founder of Matrix Analytical, and a consultant to head coaches, athletic directors, and football ops personnel. You can find him on Twitter at College Football Professor. How are things going, Adam?
Pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me back on. This is good.
Absolutely. For those Redcasters that might not be as familiar with you and what you do in your role, can you explain a little bit what that is, Matrix Analytical, and what you have done, your co-founder of it?
Absolutely. So basically what we do is we aid athletic directors, head coaches, football ops personnel, and even we've got into representing some coaches who are maybe under they don't have quite the network established to find jobs who are really quality coaches. We help all those facets of people fill their needs as far as whether that be a head coach or a whole staff of 10 on-field coaches, or we're just kind of there to do whatever those clients need us to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Redcasters, we'll get to the meat of this, but let's go over a couple of the upcoming episodes and then also some of our sponsors. We have a fan forum scheduled for next Wednesday, a week from tonight, actually, at this time, 8 p.m., with former Husker Cody Glenn, black shirt and eye back. So he's switched positions. I think we'll hear about that some of this offseason with some players. He's also a Texas high school football coach now, so a lot of interesting discussion there. Next up is we have the Redcast store. It's now open. And so if you go and use this QR code, it will actually take you to the webpage with all of our gear. And we've got some really cool shirts and long sleeve shirts and hats and all that good stuff. So, take care of, go and get yourself a shirt. You deserve it. Next up here is, that's that one. It's Glow Big Red right now. We're in the middle of Glow Big Red. Dave, I know I was looking it up, and Dave, I know you're a College of Architecture guy, and your college is doing quite well per person. They've been doing really well getting some funds sent in there, and by all means, go to glowbigred.unl.edu, support the University of Nebraska and its endeavors. You can give to the athletic side, you can give it to the academic side. So this is a great thing that's going on. And Alumni Hall, 2 Lincoln locations, downtown, South Point Pavilions. I was just there the other week, got a bunch of good stuff. Support the people there at Alumni Hall.
Hey, Honky, how's the engineering college doing with Glow Big Red?
I gave a donation today in in honor of my dad, a 1971 graduate of electrical engineering. So nice. Every year, that's my tradition I do.
Your
Boomer
dad
fencing club doing okay?
Yeah, well, no.
The fencing club's not getting any money from Glow Big Red? I mean, come on, man.
I don't believe so.
As an alumni, you need to be
I know. So
pumping those good. Yeah, Honky's point, College of Architecture, I've been working with Cameron Andreessen, I believe, who's with NU Foundation and connected with the College of Architecture. Also a College of Journalism and Mass Communications alum, just like you, Honk. So hopefully both of those colleges are doing well with Glow Big Red.
Absolutely. Well, should we get to tweets of the week, Dave?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, we always like to start, Adam, with tweets of the week, and we're going to kind of theme these in 2 different approaches. The first one is we're going to talk about some recruiting. And in addition to the analytics that you guys work with coaches and football ops people, you also get into recruiting analytics. And so this was what I would say is a fun tweet that we sent out about a week ago. And it's that the Lincoln Airport currently has direct flights to Chicago, Denver, and Houston. And then from a purely recruiting standpoint, if you could name your top 3 nonstop destinations you would like to see L&K add, where would they be? So we have Lincoln, Denver, and Houston right now, but where would we like to add from that? And we'll go around the room, but I'll start with you, Adam, and we'll go from there.
Wow. Okay. So with this staff so far, it seems like you'd want something in, like, let's say Newark, New Jersey, out east that way. Which, think about a non-stop flight to Newark. That wouldn't be a destination most people outside of recruiting. But I think with the staff, they've proven they have a lot of those East Coast ties, so that might be good for them. I know we have Houston up there, but I think just a nonstop flight to Dallas would be useful, and then one to Atlanta. I think you get those 3 on there, and you have a lot of good bases covered there.
Mm-hmm. Grand Island flies to Dallas. It's a little surprising that we don't have that from Lincoln. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, well, I would say, at least in the short term, I would like it to fly to Phoenix in particular, unless we can just have a charter flight for one particular individual on a regular basis, or maybe an assistant coach and a family member. I don't know, but Phoenix seems handy right now.
Yeah, Boomer.
Well, I just kind of go along with Dave here. Something to the West Coast, whether it's Phoenix or LA, especially with UCLA and USC coming into the conference. I think you're going to have better recruiting opportunities out west, and you might as well take advantage of that. As long should be a coast to coast operation when it comes to recruiting to Nebraska, so that'd give you the chance.
Yeah, it was, Coach White, the new defensive coordinator, has connections out west, and I know we just brought in a defensive lineman from California. I think the 3 that I wrote down, I kind of took the approach a little bit that Adam did of something out east to reflect Coach Rhule's background, whether that's Philadelphia or, you can name 100 towns out there, but Philly, Newark, something that would be in that area. I think I did Dallas as well, which doubles up in Texas, but that seems to be such a priority area that it kind of made sense. And then to your point there, Boomer, I did throw something out west, and I don't know if it was Vegas or LA or something, but just something to get us kind of into that side.
Fresno, something like that.
Fresno, it's lovely this time of year. And I know that we had some people responding that are like, the coaches don't fly commercial, they get on a private plane, which again defeats the purpose of the question. And also this is for players being able to fly in here too on a Saturday morning, and that's always been a challenge to get kids into Lincoln, in a quick manner on recruiting weekends during the season. And so if you think of it that way, it is nice to have some direct flights that can come in. We used to have Atlanta when we had Delta, but that went away. All right. Well, speaking of recruiting, March 25th is a big one here. I'm not going to go through all the names, but headlining it, Dylan Raiola, a couple of 5-star guys, a couple 4-star guys, a big weekend that's starting to get in the works here. I doubt that it's just going to end with these 9 that are listed. I think this is more to get us into a larger conversation about recruiting. And, Adam, I'm going to bring you back into this now. We've had this discussion a lot on the show. I don't want to get philosophical about what does a star mean, but how important are stars, or how important is recruiting classes, having a top 10 one to have a top 10 team, top 15, or where do you definitely need to be in at the minimum to get to the place where I think all of us as fans want to be?
Yeah, well, recruiting is very important. You look at just straight up picking winners in college football, right? I think it's 77%. Now, my partner Dave Bartu has this written down somewhere. He tracks this a little closer than I do, but 77% of all winners, you can pick just from talent alone. Just who has the more talented roster. So that right there tells you, hey, yeah, the recruiting rankings, they are not perfect. There's different ways to go about it, but they do mean something. As far as getting where Nebraska wants to go, the college football playoff, there's been only since before TCU got in this year. That was kind of a different story, and before Cincinnati lost a couple of years. any team that has been like a threat in the college football playoff was in the top 10 as far as roster talent over the course of 4 years. So if you're wanting to compete at a high level, you've got to get your composite, roster talent rating down into that top 10. I mean, you're not going to go in and beat Georgia or beat Ohio State or beat Alabama with the 25th, 30th, ranked roster talent in the country. That's most likely not going to happen, and it's least likely to happen now that the playoff is expanded, because you're going to have to win 3 games in a row against some of those more talented teams. So recruiting matters a lot. I know people could try to downplay it and say, oh, we're going to go find diamonds in the rough, and that's great to find a few of those, but you can't base your entire roster on diamonds in the rough.
Yeah. So a couple questions, Adam. First, could I get an email from you for football season, so when we can start gambling, I can actually get some advice? Secondly, so like how when you're talking about evaluating talent on rosters and recruiting numbers, how does Matrix Analytical do that compared to, say, a Rivals or an On3? I mean, like, what are you doing? Are you doing composite of some sort? Are you doing something different? I just want to understand the logistics of how you're scoring and ranking these teams and the rosters.
It's just purely composite rankings from On3 and from Rivals and from 247 over the past 4 years. And then we now that the transfer portal is what it is, every year you have to go in and track where kids have gone, which is a task in itself. But every year, more than the past, for sure, those roster talent is ebb and flow. So but that's how we do it, and we try to keep up with the transfer portal the best we can. But yeah, it's just purely composite recruiting rankings. We don't do anything special.
Yeah. And are you using it's a little bit in the weeds, but I've noticed some of the recruiting services now like re-rank players in the transfer portal opposed to just using their incoming freshman score. Is that what you're doing too? Or using that
exactly.
score?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. It's really interesting to see how sometimes they get re-ranked. It's
intriguing. It is.
Yeah.
Do you find is there a big difference between Rivals and 24/7 and ESPN, whatever the different ones that you use? Do you notice a big difference between them, or is there? I guess I'll just leave it at that. Are they pretty comparable? I guess in most cases.
Most cases they're pretty comparable. Like within the top, say 30 or 35 teams are pretty comparable. When you get down below that, that's when you start seeing your big inconsistencies, just because of how those different sites rate their classes and how they come up with those ratings with how many are in each of those recruiting classes for some of those lower ranked teams. So the top 35 or top 40 are usually pretty consistent. You get down past that, and it kind of starts to get a little wild after that. But that's why
it's fair to say that like ESPN seems to be kind of like disassociating themselves a little bit from the recruiting rankings. They don't seem to be that much focused on that any longer.
Yeah, we don't use ESPN at all. Yeah. We use so
makes sense.
There was a couple articles this weekend in the World Herald Journal Star, and it was about how Nebraska, the state of Nebraska, the talent has risen, or at least we're getting more scholarship offers. And I think some of this leads to the questions of, is the talent better, or is the talent good? And people are getting noticed now through things. We've had Glenn Snodgrass, the coach at York, on, and we talked to him about this last summer, and he talked about how important Huddle was, and services like Huddle, where a kid can be living out in Ainsworth, like Carter Nelson is, a 4-star tight end, and being out in Ainsworth, he can send out, he's an 8-man football player, and he can send out his video on Huddle and have coaches all over the place see it. We talked with Steve Warren last year, and again, Warren Academy, and what services like the Warren Academy are doing, giving players these opportunities to go to camps and get seen and just help them with the recruiting process. All of that combined with good talent, and all of a sudden we've got a lot of schools coming into to Nebraska to get our players.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, when I grew up in rural Nebraska, right, and back then there were kids I knew who were just, they were country strong, just big, strong guys. They weren't much in the weight room, but they threw bales all summer long. And this dudes you didn't want to play football against. You hated lining up against those guys because you knew it was going to be like hitting a piece of iron. Those type of guys who just they never got exposed like they should have. And now, like you said, with Huddle and with some of these other, coaches are like, for example, Coach Rhule. He's got certain metrics he looks for. Okay, he looks for speed. He looks for a certain size of an offensive lineman he's looking for. If a kid hits those metrics, then he takes a closer look at him, right? And he can teach the game of football to that kid. But he looks for those certain attributes. Coaches with that type of mindset are going to find more of those players because they're not locked into necessarily what the kid is ranked on those recruiting sites. They're going to go out and they're going to find these kids, and you'll see that a lot of these times after a coach like Coach Rhule finds these kids and covers them, then the rankings come afterwards. So it's interesting.
Quick question here, Adam, and I know this is not what actually you do. You just said you use a composite score from other recruiting services, but since you do speak with coaches and work with various different athletic departments, are you aware of schools that or coaches that have like their own recruiting ranking system, essentially? That, obviously they have the big board and they're doing their own self-evaluations of players, especially early in a process, but are they using metrics just like how you support for making coaching searches and all those type of things? Are they using metrics that same way kind of that the recruiting services, but have their own like weighting system and all that type of stuff? Do you know?
Well, we've actually done some work for some schools in the past where they've asked us, hey, what is the average height and weight of a kid coming out of high school who starts in the game in our conference? Okay.
Right.
And so we'll put that together for a coach or an athletic department, and they will actually go out and use those metrics in recruiting. They'll look for an offensive lineman who's between 6'3" and 6'6" and 260 and 290. They'll look for kids in that size range, and that helps them filter it down and focus on those guys so there's not so much film to watch. That's come across more than once, and we've done that for more than one program. So that's is that kind of what you're asking? Is that what you're kind of
yeah, exactly. I was just trying to think through, like, again, you're not the one doing this, but I imagine you would have seen or heard coaches that are using metrics in their own way, right?
Exactly.
Opposed to just relying on, because the Honky's point, we've always had a hard time defining how a Rivals or a 247 or an On3 gets to their score. Right. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a black box because it's their like proprietary system. Right. And we've always tried to make the case of like, well, really good coaching staffs probably should be making their own evaluation. If you're just looking at the On3 board and saying, oh, I'm going to go after those 20 linebackers because On3 tells me they're good, that's probably not a very good way to recruit to your class. You want to figure out how you want to recruit. I was just wondering how much that they are doing that on a real metrics based standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's creeping into the game more and more. What you're saying, coaches are becoming more and more aware of, hey, we might find that diamond in the rough outside of that size range, but let's play the 80-20 rule here. And if we miss out on that 20%, fine, but we're going to hit 80% of the time on the guys we're looking for. Yeah. Especially with how extensive the recruiting season is now. Coaches don't have time to go through and filter through 1,800 offensive linemen. It's much more efficient for them to filter that down to 500, and then really focus on those guys and get the guys out of there that fit their scheme and fit their vision for what they're trying to do in each program.
I think you definitely see staffs growing at Nebraska. I know we have the tied with Michigan now with the largest staff that's been hired. I think sometimes with the recruiting, for me, it's one of the things that frustrates me a little bit is it's the chicken or the egg thing. Someone's a 4-star. Is it because some, Rivals or whoever it is, I'm not picking on one, but they identified this as a great player? Or I can recall a 2-star kid that came to one of the coaches' clinics that I was at. He was being recruited it was Mike Riley at the time. And this 2-star quarterback steps in front of the team after practice and he just gets introduced to the team. And then also I noticed Alabama, I think the next day offered him, and suddenly he was a 4-star. And it was like, it was that kind of it's that game of like, I'm sure the kid
was a quick learner, Honky.
Yeah. He wasn't magically, all the more talented or anything. He just went from 2 to 4 stars overnight. And you see things like that. But in the state of Nebraska, this is an interesting year. This last one, we had 8 kids that have come to Nebraska, that's an amazing number to start with. But you live down in Oklahoma, Adam, and 2 of the kids we didn't get. One of them is McIntyre from Fremont Bergen going to Oklahoma, and then the quarterback of the year, the one that we didn't offer until Rhule got here, is going out there to Oklahoma State. And there's 2 more kids that went to Iowa State. So that's 12 kids going P5 from the state of Nebraska. And I don't see that going away now that the other schools are willing to come here and make relationships and see that there's talent.
I mean, the talents, I mean, let's be real. The talent's always been there in the metro. It's just been underappreciated and undervalued. I think it's a gold mine that people are just starting to realize. And, I think when we heard Coach Rhule and that staff say that, hey, we need to lock this down, those are things that you'd like to hear. I mean, you want to hear a staff take pride and be a little territorial about their home state. And that'll be interesting going forward to see if we can capitalize a little bit on those relationships he's creating and keep some of those kids in the state.
Mm-hmm. I say we because Adam, if people aren't aware of this, and you've been on the show last year with us too, Adam's a Husker fan in addition to the role that he has obviously with the Matrix Analytical. So it's interesting because I know that this is a special program to you, and you said you're from small town Nebraska. Where are you from?
Beatrice.
What area?
Beatrice.
Okay, so I'm Roca. I'm just barely north of you there.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on, and we're going to go to the second part of the tweets of the week, and this is going to be dealing with Matrix Analytical, what you guys have done, what you do with working with coaches, working with football ops people and ADs. And this is a tweet that you sent out on November 27th of 2022. All of our thanks and appreciation to Athletic Director Trev Alberts for the honor of trusting us to be part of the process for Husker Football Nation. It was an intensely diligent process that left no data stone unturned. Congratulations, Coach Matt Rhule, and let's go Big Red. It was. I mean, if anyone remembers the opening day press conference that when Coach Rhule was announced, when Trev came up and talked, he actually mentioned early on something along the lines of analytics. He didn't name you guys by name, but he said, we worked with an analytics group. Well, it was you guys. You guys also worked with Auburn this offseason. First off, just what does it mean to you? I'm going to say this as a Husker fan. So, because there's some things I know that are proprietary. We can't get into certain things when we're talking, but just as a Husker fan, as we mentioned earlier, what did it mean to you to get that chance to work with Nebraska on such a monumental hire?
Oh man, it was a blessing. It really was a blessing, but it was a little bit more serious than the other coaching searches I held. Because I was like, okay, because I'm a season ticket holder. We go to as many games as we can get up there for. So I'm thinking, okay, if I give bad data, if I'm feeding bad data to Trev, I not only am I going to suffer for it, but the whole 80,000 people in attendance are going to suffer for it too. Got to get this right. So it's a lot more pressure than just, and I take pride with every program we work with, trying to do the best we can for every client. But there is something special about when the home school comes calling and asks for assistance. That was really something truly special.
Mm-hmm. How different, without getting into specifics of this program's like this and this program's like that, how different is the job that you guys do from one school to the next? Are the processes very similar, or have you had ones where, wow, this is so different working with school X versus school Y versus school Z?
Well, we worked with seven FBS programs this year in this offseason so far, and the five out of the Power Five and 2 out of the Group of 5, and every one of them does things a little bit different. Some athletic directors, they will have their list ready to go that this is the list they want to work on. They don't want to hear any outside names outside their list. They just want to help us filter that list and help just be a tool to help them compare. I mean, they're dealing with a 1,000-piece puzzle, and we are only 3 pieces of that 1,000-piece puzzle. So our job is to help them better see the picture that they're trying to put together. Although we realize we're not the whole picture. I mean, we're just a tool in their toolbox to kind of help them filter the data that they have at their fingertips. So other athletic directors will have a short list, but they want us to add our recommendations to guys that we think should be on their list but aren't. And then other athletic directors have come to us and said, "We got nobody. Give us a top 5, and we'll go through and we'll have discussion back and forth on who fits our culture and our program, and we'll go from there." So it's very every athletic director is different. Every athletic director has a different personality, and their personality usually comes through in their process and how they really handle their business with the programs that they're representing.
So with an example where they're giving you a blank slate, essentially.
Yeah.
I guess has there ever been a situation where they literally don't give you any criteria and you just like list your top 5 or top 10 coaches that are available, or has it always been more of a conversation of like, okay, so tell me what you're looking for, and then we will craft our recommendations based off of like some criteria just like that you want, right, from an experience or offensive philosophy or anything like that?
We've done a little bit of both. There has been a couple times, and this is our 6th year of doing this. There have been times in the past where there have been no criteria. The first question we had to go in with was, "Hey, what's our budget? What's your budget look like? What names can we chase? What names are just not going to happen here?" And then that's our criteria. That's the only criteria we have is a budget, and we'll go out and we'll form a list of 10 to 15 candidates for them with that budget, and we kind of use just some not analytical data necessarily, but just knowledge of their institution, and say you don't want to necessarily pair a coach in the Southeast who's never coached in the Southeast before, only coached in the West Coast or in the Northwest. You don't want to do that, so you want to kind of use some common sense in that aspect, but there's those blank slates. Those usually end up into some pretty wild nights and pretty interesting conversations. So
yeah, I could imagine. I mean, that's really interesting. Well, has there been and I'm monopolizing the questions, guys, so boomers jump in, but
you're good.
But like with the criteria, when it's a blank slate, for example, what have you found are the most telling metrics criteria for a successful coach, right? As there's certain things that always kind of bubble up and you're like, oh, these 2 or 3 things characteristic wise or we're always going to look for, and then maybe you start to then from a geography or other things kind of start to narrow it down. What are the most significant criteria for a successful head coaching search?
One of the flags we look for first is just progression, year-over-year progression. When a coach takes a program over, you don't want to see negative progression. You don't want to see regression. You see throughout his career, no matter how many stops he's been at, you want to see, okay, what's that first year look like, and then how quickly does he build on that first year? And also, it kind of going into that as well is, what did he take over? What was he walking into? And what did he do with the pieces that he was given to take off with there? So progression is really the first analytics number we look at in a coach, and it's one that if there's over the course of a coach's career, if he shows a regression number there, year-over-year regression, that's a big red flag. That's okay. This guy's maybe taken over some good situations and just kind of rode them out and improved.
You see that, yeah.
You don't want that guy. You want a guy who's taken over something and has been able to improve year over year on what he's been able to accomplish.
That would seem to be a good sign with Coach Rhule and where he has been in the past in college football, certainly. And that is something we've talked about. We've joked about it a little bit with the percentages. Boomer, I know Boomer's our resident statistician, and people will sit there and say he's a career 500 coach, but he took over programs, went 1-10, and got to 10-1 or 11-1, and so that's going to average 50%. But it's to your point there. Have you left a place better than what you took over? And you said earlier, common sense, and I think that when I heard that, immediately the word that came to my mind, which you hear a lot in these coaching searches, is fit. And is it a good fit, bad fit, whatever? And I'm going to use two examples, and I'm just using them for reference. It's not about these two guys, but Coach Rhule at Nebraska, you hear a lot about him being a good fit. And then you hear Dion primetime going to Boulder, and it being, is that a good fit? Is he, he's from the Southeast. Is he going to fit into the Pac-12? Fit becomes, that's the word that we hear. So I'm going to reference what I said earlier about stars and recruiting. What does a star mean? Well, to you, what does fit mean? And is that something, do you guys have a fit analytics, an analytic for fit, or how do you guys kind of clarify what fit is with a coach to a school?
Well, it all comes back to, recruiting. Okay. You don't want to put a coach in, let's say, that's a good example. Okay. For example, Mike Riley, when he was up really humming at Oregon State, okay, you wouldn't have never taken him and put him at Florida State. Mm-hmm. All his recruiting, all his relationships were on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest. You're not going to take that guy, put him down in Tallahassee, and expect him to be able to hire guys that know the area quickly and be able to put together a good recruiting plan in a place he's never been, in a place that Abby, you're funny. You're not going to do that because that doesn't fit. That you're setting that coach up for failure. You're setting that program up for failure. Another example of this would be someone like, you're not going to take. Let's think of another one here. You're not going to take. Well, I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
Adam, I got a joke I can insert here. This is kind of like not trying to fit Honky into a size 34 jeans, right?
Well, depending on the year and the time of year.
I am unfamiliar with Honky's waistline, so
I was a lot closer to that. I was a lot closer to that back in October, and then now.
Yeah, darn holidays. Yeah.
Hey man, things change. I just go with the flow.
Change. Good point, Honky. Yeah.
I had a question, Adam, when it comes to analyzing coaches, and we can use Rhule as an example of this, where you're looking at a coach that previously coached in college and hasn't for a few years. How do you, given the changes with like NIL and transfer portal and things they may not have dealt with as a prior coach, how do you take that into account when you're evaluating a current coach or assistant or whatever?
Well, that's kind of outside the lines for us analytically, because you don't know what that coach has been paying attention to and what he is privy to and not privy to. As far as guys coming from the NFL who have been out a little while, the NFL is so different from college as far as just the game itself. It's anything that a coach has done in the NFL, we leave that alone. We almost treat it like a completely different sport. Okay, we look at. If a coach is coached at the FCS level, we take that into consideration, and the FBS level. Anything outside of that, it doesn't play into our metrics at all, because you're comparing apples and oranges at that point. Now, as far as how NIL and how that kind of stuff impacts, we don't know that yet. We don't know what a coach has been paying attention to. We don't know what he's learned. In the off season and actually putting together his staff. So we kind of stay out of those discussions that we don't have any numbers for, or we don't have any opinion on, honestly.
That's interesting. And since someone like Lance Leipold, like at Wisconsin Whitewater, doesn't really fit into your metrics per se.
No, his career at Wisconsin Whitewater, we don't take that into account. Our database starts when he got to Buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still good for him, but not nearly as good as winning 6 titles in 7 years there at that level. Yeah. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned NFL, and I'm just going to move on to the next question, but we can just keep this conversation going about what we've been talking about. But this was another tweet, and this is from your partner in crime there, Dave Bartu, and he was on the show. What I thought was interesting is last summer when you guys were both on the show together, you said that was the first time you guys were ever on a video call together. Is that right? That we were the first time that you guys were ever together, like face to face.
It was, yeah. It's funny because Dave and I talk probably 2 to 3 times a day. Okay, but we don't, we never FaceTime. The first time we ever actually talked live was on you guys' show last year. So
that's amazing.
That's crazy. Well, he tweeted out today. This was in reference to a tweet from The Athletic, and The Athletic said they were talking about the New York Giants staff. So this is the NFL connection. That rather than rely on old friends and former colleagues, Brian Daboll cast a wide net for his assistants. The result is a coaching staff that helped the Giants to their first playoff win since 2011. And Dave retweeted that and quote tweeted it, said, started the concept in the FBS 3 years ago, now moved into 17 FBS teams and the NFL. Best available is better than the best available buddy. And that's a discussion I know that we've had in Nebraska as fans, whether it was the last staff, everyone coming with Coach Frost from UCF, or with this staff, is there too many buddies coming in, or what's the right blend of, this is somebody I've worked with, this is somebody's kid that I've worked with, this is a longtime high school coach that I've coached with, and then there's also guys that I haven't worked with before, Rayola, the White, the new defensive coordinator, and so what's the blend there, or how do you kind of how do you gauge that? What kind of analytics do you do on that when it comes down to the friend factor?
Well, that's kind of what we developed our whole model for, was to kind of go against the whole buddy hire thing, because there's so many talented coaches who are out there who are without a job right now as we speak, just because they didn't network well. Mm-hmm. They're terrific at their jobs. They had terrific results, and they may be a part of a staff that was let go, and then they just kind of got forgot. They're at a high school somewhere, or that they're at a Division II school somewhere, or they're at an FCS school somewhere when they deserve to be at a Power 5 school because they're that good of a coach. But they don't have the network to do that. Those are the guys that we pull in and we like to represent. We actually take the top 60% of those coaches in our database and we will market them and try to get them out there to get hired. I mean, just last week, we talked to a wide receiver coach who's now at an FCS program, who 2 years ago was up for Football Scoop wide receiver coach of the year, and now his staff was let go, and he just kind of got lost in the shuffle. He didn't network well, and now he's at a lower tier FCS school and trying to work his way back up. And he's a talented wide receiver coach, but he does not have that connectivity. Those are the type of guys we're trying to help. We're trying to push to the forefront here. Now, you talk about the correct blend. You've got to have guys on your staff who understand your vision, who will pull your direction. But you also can't be afraid to go out and hire guys who are maybe smarter than you, and can bring some fresh ideas and can bring some things that maybe challenge you a little bit to think of things in new ways. Now there's a cautionary tale there. Don't bring too many alphas in at the same time, because you can't have, of your 10 headsets, you can't have 7 of them who are aspiring to be a head coach right away, because you're going to have heads butt, and you're going to have guys who are more worried about what they're doing affects their career, going forward, than actually what may be good for the team. So it's a delicate blend there. You got to have some big personalities for sure. Your defensive coordinator, those guys have to be leaders. They got to be, and I know you guys have talked to Damon Benning before. He says something that I really agree with, and we really have seen in the past 5 to 6 years is, head coaches teach coordinators teach position coaches teach players. That hierarchy seems to work the best. So you can't have position coaches who are undermining your coordinators. You can't have coordinators who are undermining your head coach. You got to have all these guys who if they don't necessarily have the same vision, they respect the hierarchy and they're able to pull in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. I think you made a really good point there with like when you're bringing that staff together, to not be afraid to look outside and not be afraid to bring somebody that can be smarter and add some value there, right? And I think as fans, we get stuck a lot of times on, well, it needs to be this person because it just needs to be. This guy is definitely, he's the home run hire. How many times have we heard that? The can't miss. And there's some words that we've kind of struck from the lexicon, the Redcast lexicon from this time moving forward. Home run hire would be one of them. But, even just as recent as a couple of months ago, I'm guilty of saying it, that, boy, if we don't have Coach Bush or Coach Joseph come back, it's gonna blow up the team, and we're gonna lose all these guys. And it's a non-negotiable. We have to have X guy come back. And here we are with the right coaching staff coming in and bringing in guys that in some cases we'd never even heard of, and yet it didn't blow up the team. We have in fact we have 105 guys right now on scholarship. We have to get down because we've had so many. And so sometimes the way that things play out aren't always the way that you can predict that way. But we've talked about a lot of different analytics. I think I'd be remiss, and Dave would want me to show this, so I will. Do you have a doppelganger analytics or anything based off of that?
Like 90% accurate here.
That is.
Can you find someone who looks more like Matt Rhule?
Have you guys have been seen in the same room before, haven't you?
Yeah. So my oh geez, I don't know.
Photoshopped.
I went to the welcoming press conference that day for Coach Rhule, and I was standing right next to him, and I got a selfie with him behind me. So we were in the same photo. It's official.
Back to the metrics.
Yes, go for it.
I'm interested on actually what goes into ranking these assistant coaches. I think it's pretty intriguing. I think I saw you guys tweet out. I think it was Coach Fisher, obviously on our old staff, just got hired at Syracuse, and you guys said he was like top 30 defensive backs coach or something like that. And to your point of like ranking these, so tell us a little bit more about actually how you rank these assistant coaches on their performance, and taking into factor things like the talent that they have.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we're about to get nerdy here. All right, so
that's all right. That's what we brought you on, man.
So the database that we keep is massive, and we have every play that's been called since 2009. Okay, we have every on-field coach. We know where they were at since 2009. We take every play. For example, let's say we're grading running backs. All right, every single time a running back got the ball, what happened? Was he tackled for a loss? Did he get 3 yards? Did he get 10 yards? Did he get 15 yards? What happened when that running back got that ball? And how did that running back room progress every year as far as those per play metrics? How did those running backs progress in his room while he was there? How many draft picks did he develop, and what were those draft picks ranked coming out of high school? Did he develop those guys? These are all things that go into grading a guy, not just over a season, but over the entire career that he's put together.
Right.
And then we take that and we put some weighting on it to take care of. We call it roster talent difference, RTD. It's what the talent you have on hand on your roster. How does it compare to the talent that you are normally facing in a college football game and in a college football season? Some coaches have the luxury of having Georgia talent, and they have, just an embarrassment of riches, and they have the best talent, week in and week out every time they hit the field. Other coaches don't, and they have to develop those guys and beat guys who across the field for them who have better talent. You want to look for the guys who are able to take that lesser talent and still have the results that reflect well compared to the entire country, and also with their peers in their own talent level. So we take all those things together, we throw them in a formula, we shake it up, and it spits out a grade on each coach. And like I talked about earlier, how we look for coaches who are in the top 60, the top 60th percentile in our database. And that means, okay, if a running back coach is somewhere and he is in the top 60%, that means he's better than 60% of all the other running back coaches since 2009. We want to help that guy find a job somewhere because he's good. He deserves it. His career has proved that he can take players and develop them and get results year in year out at his talent level, and maybe be even below or above his talent level. So it's a massive database. It's huge. I actually had to buy. Dave and I both had to buy new computers who could handle it. Otherwise, it was like hit, and then we'd go eat lunch, come back, and see what it calculated for us. I mean, it was massive undertaking.
It's like the Whopper computer from War Games or something.
Yeah, it was like it sometimes.
You said two things there.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned if a team has Georgia talent, so on one side, and then how do you develop talent? And right now with Nebraska, of all things, we brought in some Georgia talent, namely 3 transfers from Georgia, 3 transfers from Florida too. So 6 transfers right there from big time, blue blood kind of SEC teams. But on top of that, you mentioned the development factor. Is that something, I guess not a specific ranking, but I guess, do you rank that? I mean, does Coach Rhule have a ranking that is associated with development and how well he develops? Is that one of the analytics that you guys can track, or how do you gauge, whether they are good development coaches or not?
Well, maybe not Coach Rhule specifically, because we attribute the development to the position coaches.
Okay.
So, for example, Coach Joseph, okay, who wide receiver coach. I think we had it now off the top of my head. I think it was like 1 out of every 3 wide receivers that he recruited and signed to his class was going to get drafted in the first 2 rounds. That's incredible.
That's pretty good.
That's incredible. That's high end. Okay, that's high end development. That's what we look at for high end development there. Another guy similar to that. Let's talk about.
Hey, Adam, I'll throw a name out. How about Brian Frentz?
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh like that.
But, that's why I asked.
No, he's offensive line and tight end coach. He's great.
Yeah. I was going to say, as a position coach developing, I mean that.
Yeah.
He's crapped on for all the right reasons as an OC, but geez, talent or tight end wise, that's tight end you.
So,
but as OC, it's a little different story. But you only rate position coaches, is that right? Because they're the ones developing the talent. So the OC or DC wouldn't have that. Interesting. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Well, still good for the joke.
Boomer, do you have any questions? You've been awfully quiet.
I've just been monitoring our chat and all
Boomer.
that. No, it's all right. Well, I know, Adam, you guys do this for football. Have you thought about branching out into basketball or baseball, anything like that, other college sports? Or, I know it's such you can get new computers, and crunch all sorts of numbers now.
We've actually talked about it, mulled it over, but Dave and I both, we got into this labor of love 9 years ago when we started developing this because we love football. We love the game of football. We had a passion for it. We don't have that same love for these other sports. So it's harder to, on those days where you're just grinding on this database, trying to keep it up to date when the coaching carousel is going crazy. The coaches are moving every day, and you got to keep up with it. That's not something we were willing to do for some of these other sports. I mean, it's a lot of labor, especially this time of year and keeping up with the roster talent and things like that. We wouldn't be able to fairly replicate this in any other sport and do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. And have you ever been approached? I know you mentioned earlier you talked primarily FCS, FBS programs. Have you ever been approached by a Division II program or NAIA, anything like that, for services or anything?
Not yet. We haven't. Now we've had coaches from the NAIA and Division II contact us and want to know where they were ranked in our database and if we could help market them And wow, we FCS is the lowest level that we're able to grade position coaches and grade coordinators and coaches. So at this time, we would just tell them, hey, we don't have any data for you until you hit the FCS level. At that point in time, we can start evaluating you. And if you hit that our threshold of the top 60%, then we'd be glad to market you. But anything below that, then it's getting into the weeds a little much.
So to give it like an example, like Coach Ryan Held, who was with Nebraska for a number of years, and he's in your database because he was at UCF, he was at Nebraska last year, he was at North Alabama, so that would be FCS, I believe. So he still would be in it, but now he's the head coach at UNK. So for as long as he's going to be there would just be a gap, so to speak, in your database until if he came back into FBS at some point, there'd just be a however many year gap while he's at Division II.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. Exactly.
And then with Nebraska coaches like Terrence Knighton or Garrett McGuire, you just don't have any. Their data's zero right now.
Yep, it's zero. They're a blank slate. Yep, those guys. Those guys who are coming in with no FBS or FCS experience, they're blank slates. We don't have an opinion on them either way.
Well, we'll see.
Is what Nebraska staff has right now, is this unique in the number at an FBS level? Is it unique that we have a number of guys that don't have any data? Knighton, McGuire, Bob Wager, has been a long time, very successful high school coach in Texas, but there just isn't any data with them. Is that unique that Nebraska has, a decent chunk of our staff that way? Or do you see this a lot of times? Or are there a lot of staffs that have 3-4 guys that don't have any data on them?
Well, Nebraska, I think when we ran the numbers, I think they're the 16th most inexperienced. I don't want to say inexperienced. It's not what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. They're the staff with the least amount of FBS, FCS experience in the country. 16th. I think they're ranked 16th, the most inexperienced. If that's the correct word. That's not the correct word. They're a young staff. There's a lot of elements we really, really like about it. Coach Rhule. How I talked about, we don't track their development of players, but we do track the head coach's ability to hire assistants and what those assistants go on to do later. Coach Rhule has an impeccable track record of finding guys like this, and they turn out to be excellent assistants. You look at like Elijah Robinson down in Texas A&M, excellent defensive line coach. He started with Coach Rhule. You have Fran Brown at Georgia, who started out with Coach Rhule, who's an excellent defensive backs coach. There's numerous guys like that who was able to go. And
Joey McGuire, right?
Yeah, exactly, at Texas Tech. He's able to pluck out of seemingly thin air who are really good guys. So, Coach Rhule, he has that covered as far as finding young guys who are hungry and who are able to live up to the standard he needs them to. There's a few young guys on the staff that we do have grades for. We love Barthel. We love Cooper. Those are both young coaches who we love their arc and their career so far. They have the potential to be superstars. Coach White is the same way. He's young and he's early on in his career. We love his arc. Ed Foley is a great special teams coach. So he's done. Although the staff is extremely young, there are elements of it that we really do like as far as what we're able to rate.
And I know we're happy with having 2 coordinators that are coming from P5 schools as coordinators. I mean, that's something for us. I think that we're really pleased with the level and the experience of the coordinators that we have coming in. You mentioned 16th most inexperienced. Is that at the P5 level, or is that at all of FBS? How it's the 16th out of what? 16th most inexperienced out of how many?
FBS, all 130.
All 130 FBS. Okay.
They average 2.7 years of FBS, FCS experience per on-field coach.
Okay. Do you do anything with strength and conditioning coaches? Any kind of rankings there, or is that not applicable?
No, we really haven't found we've tested that for the past 2 to 3 years, trying to find a reliable way to kind of measure what's going on there and who is responsible for what. And there just really isn't a good way to do that right now. that we feel comfortable in actually using for schools to hire those guys. Usually those guys are guys the head coach has to have a pretty intimate relationship with, because they have the team the majority of the time. So the coach has to trust that guy with his team for the majority of the year. That's not somebody that we feel at this point we have the type of data we can go in and say definitively this guy's better than that guy. And we won't do that until we've tested it and we're confident of that.
You know, one of the coaches the only coach that has been retained from last year was Donovan Raiola at offensive line. And that led to some, early questions from Husker fans that were concerned about the O-line a year ago. Now, when Coach Rhule was asked about it, his response was that he teaches the scheme exactly the way that I want, that there's he was specific down to there are 3 different styles of blocking schemes, and he coaches the style that I like. Now let's get into the weeds there of coaching X's and O's there. When you guys are breaking down something like an offensive line coach for somebody, did you break it down at that level that there are, whether it's 3 different styles, or some people think there's 2, or some people think there's 4, but however many different styles there are, let's just say zone and gap blocking schemes. I mean, you break it down to that level where it's like, look, you're looking for zone. We're going to pull from these 10 coaches and we're going to exclude these 10 that aren't zone guys. Or how do you do it with that? And I'm using O-line as the example, but you could use defensive back coaches who are zone versus man or whatever. I mean, there's other examples.
I'd like to have like a really cool, flashy answer for you here and say, yeah, we do this and this and this, and we watch so much film. But honestly, we don't watch any film. We're not football. We're not X's and O's guys. We're nerds with a spreadsheet. and we have the numbers when we say, okay, this guy's numbers over his career say he is really good. He can coach offensive line. I don't know what scheme he runs. I know his coaching history. I know he's an air raid guy typically. So those guys, we will try to match with air raid offensive coordinators. Okay. Just an overarching philosophy. All right. You're not going to go in and you're not going to take, let's say a Stanford's offensive line coach to go and be Phil Longo's offensive line coach, right? Because Phil Longo, he's more air raid. He's not the same type of. He's not going to want to line up and mash people the way the old Stanford teams did, right? That's not going to be a match. So we will look at lineage a little bit and say, okay, this guy's lineage kind of matches up. But as far as X's and O's, we stay out of all that. We let the coaches kind of. That's when we give them the list, and they say, okay, these guys are good. Those guys don't fit what I'm trying to do here. And that's cool, And typically the way it is with the position coaches, we'll get a list of about 3 or 4 guys that the head coach really likes, and we will evaluate them for them, and then add 2 or 3 guys we think would be good fits from the criteria that the list they've already given us kind of match.
Put your Husker fan hat on for a second. Do you have the fullback's coming back? Are you a run the damn ball guy? As a fan, forget you're not supporting any other schools right now. You're a Husker fan. What do you want to see on the field?
Absolutely, man. Let's get the fullback back. Let's see some ISO. Let's see some. Yeah, I mean, I grew up the same time frame you guys did. I remember seeing, the games were close in the first, second quarter, and then by the third quarter, those holes were you could drive a truck through them because we just had pounded people into submission. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to get back to. I want to see good defense. I want to see a good, grinding out ground game with some play action pass off of it. That's the kind of football that I want to see. That's what I'm partial to.
I got one more question, Honky, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm done. You go with yours.
Just this one, and maybe it'll help Adam. The little self-promotion, I guess, because we know like most FBS coaches obviously listen to the Redcast, so it's a big opportunity. But you talked a little bit about your the start, right? The genesis story of Matrix Analytical. I was just trying to put it in my head. I think it says 9 years ago you guys started this with Dave Bartu, and then you've been doing this for 6 years, maybe publicly, and you have this gigantic database you had to collect. Could you talk a little bit about how you started to as you establish that database, start to run numbers to try to be predictive on is this guy going to be a good fit? Or I mean, like how do you start to like work on figuring out how your formula was going to help, whether it's a coaching hire or a player development or anything, that type of thing. How did you work through that? That's a really, I mean, you don't have to get too nerdy on that, but I think it's pretty intriguing that you're able to like work out the system. So you felt that confident that you could start like promoting it.
Well, yeah, like I said, we developed the system 9 years ago, right? And then we tracked it for 3 years, and we watched it for 3 years. We said, okay, according to the way we're doing things here, this coaching staff should pop. And when it did pop, that's, we're like, okay, that worked. Or, the more conversations with coaches that we had, we said, hey, we think this guy, and this guy is good. What do you think? Are we on the right track? And they would say, yeah, those guys are legit. You guys are on the right track. So the first 3 years was a lot of testing, just a lot of observation, a lot of, okay, what went wrong here if it didn't work? What can we improve? And how accurate do we need this thing to be before we actually put it out there? Nothing is going to be 100% predictive. That's not, but we kind of go with the 85-15 rule, where if we're right 85% of the time, that's good for us. We're not going to be right every time. It's just not going to happen. So once we got to that point where we were comfortable, where we're 80-85% of the time we were going to be correct, then that's when we started to go into coaches and saying, hey, we can help you with this. Give us a shot. And we had one athletic director 6 or 7 years ago that said, hey, you guys are different. You talk different. I want to bring you in and help me out with my head coach's defensive coordinator hire.
Yeah.
He wants this guy. What do you guys think? And we were honest. We said, do not hire that guy, because he's not. He's going to be terrible. And the guy didn't listen to us. He went ahead and hired the guy anyway, and he fired him the very next year because he was horrible. And their athletic director said, hey, they said this was going to happen exactly the way it happened, for the reasons they said it was going to happen. Let's go back to them, and we're going to listen to them this time. And we did, and we nailed their next hire for them. And then that athletic director started talking to other athletic directors. And that's kind of how it spread. So
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Has there ever been like an outlier where you're like, man, this should totally work, and it just like totally didn't work, and you have no explanation?
There's been a couple of those. Yeah. A few years back, and that's kind of where we learned the whole, too many chiefs on the same staff is not good. Too many on the same staff is not good. There was a and we've kind of cautioned recently. We've kind of cautioned some schools against that, and some have listened to us, some haven't. But a few years back, we absolutely stacked a coaching staff with guys that were just, they were just phenomenal position coaches and coordinators, but they got along like oil and water. It was a terrible environment for that coaching staff for that year. There was arguments consistently about philosophy and the way things were, and it didn't go well. And we learned a good lesson there that, hey, there's got to be some synergy here between these coordinators and these position coaches and these head coaches. Otherwise, you get too many guys who have the same ambition to be a head coach too quickly, and you can't have 8 head coaches on a football staff. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So you got to have a hierarchy there. Just, like I said, I mentioned Damon Benning's saying earlier, and that's exactly right, that we've kind of found to be true. So,
Hey, I do have one question that just came about as you were just talking here. You were mentioning like sometimes things can be like an outlier. We've had one just strange outlier for the last 5 years, but under the Frost era was all these close losses, the 1-score losses, the most by a far amount from the number 2 team over the course of that time period. Is there a certain analytic or analytics and multiple ones that can help explain why we lost so many close games, and maybe are the things that we would try to focus on to, next year not lose those same games by the 1 score, but to actually flip it and win it by a score? Is there anything that you can come out of looking at the scores, the games, the analytics, anything that you can kind of take out of it to say that, yeah, these are our 1 or 2 or 3 big problem areas over that time period?
Well, I think the low-hanging fruit people would want me to say is culture wasn't there, that magic word, but I don't necessarily, that's hard to put your finger on. I mean, what is a good culture? What is culture? What culture? There's totally different philosophies across the country on culture and all are successful. I mean, there are multiple different philosophies on culture are successful. So a lot of that was just, it was just circumstances, bad luck. That many close losses in a row. Yeah. That there is a reason for that, but there's not a reason that I can point to with analytics and say, that's the culprit. That's why this happened this way. That's why as a fan base, we suffered through 5 years of this, and believe me, if there was a way to find it, I would have tried to find it and would have found it, would have been yelling at the top of my lungs by now from every social media outlet I could find. But there's really not. And for me to come on and say that there is, and that we'd found one, it would just be, misleading. So
Yep. I'm not a question.
I just curious, if you did have a coach that had that kind of history, is that something you would note in your analytics that we can't explain why, but this guy loses close games or something to that effect?
There is, yeah, we do keep track of that, and some of that is is regression. I mean, for the talent profile that Nebraska has had for the past 5 years, they should have been a much better team. But when you compare this talent profile to other teams with a similar talent profile, relative to who they play, they underperformed vastly. It wasn't near the mark that the expected win totals just were not there. And I'm not pointing any fingers about whose fault it was or whatever. That's water under the bridge. But the fact remains that it was they horribly underperformed.
Well, and that's true. I mean, last summer when we had you guys on, the win projection for last year was going to be 7, and it was like 7.9 really, and then you even contacted me like a week later, and you're like, nope, we switched something with the Purdue game. We're gonna win 8, and it was like, yay!
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect example. Is and for that win for the talent profile and for the returning production profile that they had, that's what they should have won. And it didn't happen, and they got fired because of it. I mean,
and you think about that. They finished 4-8, and yet when you had a double-digit lead in the third quarter against Northwestern, double-digit lead in the fourth quarter against Wisconsin, a double-digit lead at halftime against Minnesota. Who's predicting a loss to Georgia Southern? And you go down the list and you go, without really even being that much better. And this gets back to that first question I had about what's the, I don't know if you can put an analytic around it, but how did we lose so many stinking close games? I mean, just those 4 games I just mentioned right there are ones where it's like, well, there's your 8-4. If you don't collapse, in some of those games, it's bizarre. And I don't have an analytic for it either. I have a lot of words for it, but we're a PG show. So,
yeah.
All right. This has been great.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, Redcasters, if you like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for future shows, all that good stuff. But that really helps us out. So definitely thank you for watching. But let's
and follow Adam on Twitter, right?
Yes. At CFB
Professor, or you can follow Matrix Analytical at Matrix. I think CFB Analytical, I think is what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. I was going to say it's in your description on your Twitter page, but the link is going to a page that's broken. So you may want to take a look at that when you're done.
Yeah, I will. I'll do that. Yeah,
because I was trying to find it and I clicked on it. I was like, this is broken.
Apparently, word of mouth is more important advertising than Twitter for these guys. That's how good they are.
Apparently, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the parting shots, and let's go with Boomer.
Well, as loyal listeners know, not only are Husker sports the passion of the Redcast for Australian rules football, but also pro wrestling. And a little sad news from the world of pro wrestling this week: Jerry Jarrett passed away, father of current wrestler Jeff Jarrett, and also well noted as the owner, manager, and often booker of Memphis wrestling back in the heydays of the 70s and 80s. in terms of just names in pro wrestling, he's probably one of the biggest ones, most responsible for the world of wrestling, or pro wrestling as we know it, bringing in music videos to TV shows, responsible for the careers of a wide variety of wrestlers like Jerry Lawler, Dutch Mantell, Bill Dundee, Rock and Roll Express, Sting, the Fabulous Ones, Jimmy Hart, Jim Cornette, all got their start there. Announcer Lance Russell, among others.
I know 3 of those names, I think.
Yeah, you know more than you think. If you broke them down, Honky, you know more than you thought. And he really kind of brought that new aspect of, rather from the old staged 50s, 60s style of wrestling, really brought in that kind of modern televised soap opera-esque aspect of pro wrestling, where you had like the Tupelo concession stand brawl, which is legendary, or it really reached its peak with Jerry Lawler's feud with Andy Kaufman, which, you know, pinnacle on the David Letterman show. I mean, that was, you know, classic wrestling footage. So, yeah, and he worked with WCW, WWF, and just way influential in the world of pro wrestling. And so our thoughts go out to the Jarrett family and the entire Memphis wrestling community here at the Redcast.
All right, Honky, try to top that.
Oh, well, I wanted to mention, I know she's been in our mentions here today watching, but Abby something on Twitter. She does work with you guys at college football or at Matrix Analytical, and she's been on the show. She's one of our Husker girls, and she's a real good friend of the Redcast. So shout out to Abby there. And my other parting shot is just for all the, I don't know what it's going to be like in Oklahoma tomorrow. But it's going to be cold in this area, and we're going to get some snow finally. Lincoln has only had like 3 inches or something. It's like one of the least amount of snowfall years that we've had in history, and so we actually could use some. But it sounds like we could be getting somewhere between like 4 and 8 inches overnight or over the next day. So, anyways, just stay warm and go Big Red.
All right, a wrestling memorial and a weather forecast.
There you go,
Adam. As our
versatile
guest, you can
podcast.
take us out of here. What do you got?
First off, you know what 4 to 8 inches of snow would do to Tulsa, Oklahoma? We would be shut down for a month. Honky. So yeah, keep all that up there. Let's support the Nebraska ball. Let's get to the dance of some sort. NIT, NC. I don't care. I just want to dance. I just want to dance. Just want to ride this momentum for a little while. It's been too long since we've had something to smile about as far as some of the men's athletics at UNL, and let's keep this going.
Yeah,
GBR.
absolutely. Let's see if they can beat Maryland on Sunday, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that the next time we have a show, right, Honky?
Absolutely.
All righty. Well, great show. Adam, thanks for joining us. It was really informative. Really appreciate your time. For now, let's call that a Go Big Redcast.
Go Big Red. Thanks, Adam.
A Herd at Sports Network production.